is up, everybody? It's good to be back. Ugh, 2022. New year, new studio. Not a new studio, just differently arranged, but better. Better than 2021. It's so good to be back. So today, we're talking about this, my workhorse, my daily driver. The Canon M6 Mark II. Is it any good in 2022? So, talking about the photo side of this real quick, it takes really good photos. Just banging Instagram slayers. We're talking a 32 megapixel sensor, 14-bit raw photos. Shooting in RAW, you're going to get 23 frames per second, and in JPEG, around 50. Jumping over to the video side of this, I'm going to compare it with one of the brand newest cameras to come out of Canon's lineup, the R6. So camera A, camera B, let's go. Camera A is going to have 4K 24 dual pixel autofocus, 8-bit H.264. Not that impressive, but it's better than what you would get out of like a say a T5i. Camera A is also going to have 4K 60 frames per second, and it's going to drop down to 1080 for the 120 frames. I'm not sure if it has dual pixel and 120 frames per second. Camera B, getting stoked and you don't even know why. Camera B's the M6 Mark II. Camera B is going to smash out 24 frames per second and 4K 8-bit H.264. It's going to drop down to 1080 for the 60 frames per second, but you're keeping dual pixel autofocus. And dual pixel is going to dip out at 120, but if you're using the manual focus with focus peaking, you're not going to have a problem. Camera A will have IBIS in-body stabilization, where camera B will not. It has digital with lens, but you're not paying $2,600 for the R6. You're paying $800 for the M6. So obviously you're going to lose out a couple features, but this camera's still banging in 2022. Talk about a couple more specs with you. This has the flip up screen, not the flip out screen. Don't ask me why. It's just, they make a good camera and then they put something stupid in it. So if you've got a microphone mounted on top, good luck seeing what you're doing. I do have the small rig side mount cage, so you can have your mic here and have the screen up. Shouldn't have to, but the aftermarket saved the day on that one. We're rocking an SD card slot with the Canon LPE 17 batteries. They're a dime a dozen. You can find them anywhere. You have your microphone jack, you have your HDMI. You do have a neat little flash. You know what this reminds me of? Have you ever seen the movie Short Circuit? Tell me that doesn't look like Short Circuit. Digressing. You're going to have a couple shooting modes. You'll have C1, C2, which are custom modes. I can't ever get them to work. You have full manual, which you have to be in to take photos. And you have your video mode if you want to take video. It's stupid how Canon laid out the buttons on this, but that's the way it is. And there's nothing I can do about it. You do have several switches and dials. One controls aperture and shutter. One controls your shooting mode, and the other one controls your ISO. And then you have your manual focus, your multi-function buttons, info, your record, your manual, and your playback. Now, one other downside to this camera is it is an APS-C size sensor. It's not a downside. It's just something you need to know. So if you're going to shoot with a 24mm, it'll be a 38mm. If you shoot with a 35mm, it's a 50mm. 50mm is an 80mm. 200mm is like a 311mm. So you do have to keep that in mind when you're selecting lenses for this. My normal vlog lens is a Sigma 10-20, so it's more like a 17-30, something like that. But there's an upside to that. If you only have a 200mm lens and you need to get that little extra stretch, this is going to give it to you. Now, this camera is app controlled. You can link it to your phone, Bluetooth, and you have a live little monitor that doesn't have to be on the camera, so you can set this up on a tripod, walk away to shoot yourself, and be like, yeah, I'm in frame. Now, if you do want to get away from the 1.6 crop, there's a bunch of companies that came out with speed boosters that will bring it to a full frame. But when you're using a full frame speed booster, then you need a full frame lens. So you won't be able to use a bunch of Sigma lenses. Say you have the 18-35 1.8, you will no longer be able to use it because you'll have heavy vignetting. Now, the standard lens on this is a Canon EF-M They have several different ones. I use an adapter from Canon. Viltrox also makes one. I haven't used it yet, so I don't know if it works as good. The Canon one is ridiculously expensive at $200 each, but it will allow you to take it from the EFM to the EF, so you can use full frame or APS-C size lenses. Now, a sore subject for Canon, the EOS R5 has a bad overheating problem. This does not. I've never had it overheated. I've used it in 120-degree heat to shoot 120 frames per second. I never had a problem out of it. Now, compared to the R5, it doesn't shoot 8K RAW, so maybe that's why it overheats. Somebody should have thought that one through, though. One of my most favorited things on this lens is it does have focus peaking. If you don't know what focus peaking is, once it's on your shooting manual, it'll actually throw a color grade over whatever is in focus. I've got mine set to yellow on high intensity, so once it's in focus, it's this bright yellow, and I know that I have it nailed perfectly. Now, one upgrade I did do to this, I added C-Log, and C-Log doesn't come in it naturally. That's only for Canon's high-end, super-duper, oh my god, it's expensive cameras. There's a company, I don't remember the name of it, and I'm pretty sure I couldn't even pronounce it if I tried. Links below. It's $20. You get a bunch of different color LUTs, and you just put them into your picture style, and then just go down and hit the one that it says to select. Mine is user default 1 C-Log. And if you don't know what C-Log is, it's a flat color profile that allows you more dynamic range, and out of a little camera that already doesn't have a super bunch, it helps a lot. I can't find any definitive spec on what this dynamic range is. I talked to some people at B&H and they told me it's 12 stops. I don't know if that's true. Gerald Undone, how many stops of dynamic range does this have? Now, that entire opening, it was shot in 1080 60 frames per second. I thought it looked good. I've also shot this. This is the 120 frames per second. And then I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison. The only other camera that I have that I could compare it to at the time is my $5,000 cinema camera, which is a completely unfair comparison, but I did it anyways. Now, to make it just a tad bit fair, the cinema camera is shooting cinema 4K 60 in an H.264 with its log profile to make it a little teeny-weeny, tiny bit comparable to the 1080p 60 that comes out of this. Now, that camera is capable of shooting open gate 6K RAW, so we had to dumb it down a little bit. So tell me which one you like better, camera A or camera B? Alright, so jumping into a side-by-side comparison of the two, this first shot is from the Canon M6 Mark II. You do get a lot of black crushed, and it's a little overexposed on the tire. Now, coming from the cinema camera, you keep all the detail in the shadows, and it's perfectly exposed on the tire. Moving forward, the logo for the Ford looks rather blue. Now, I do use a lot of contrast and saturation because I like the punch, but with the cinema camera, it's more realistic color. And this is maxed out contrast, maxed out saturation. So one of the telltale giveaways between the M6 Mark II and the cinema camera is the M6 Mark II. This whole area is crushed. You've lost all details, and the blacks are like a heavy, heavy black. Where with the cinema camera, you retain the detail. You can see the trim molding, the bumper, the tail light, even the window line. And this is the last shot. Yet again, in the back of the truck, you lose a lot of detail, and the shadows inside the wheel wells, you lose a lot. Where with the cinema camera, you keep the details and you can see inside the wheel wells. Now, with all that being said, you are pitting a $800 mirrorless camera up against a cinema camera that costs 5-6 times more. So obviously with the cinema camera, you will get more out of it. But overall, I do believe the M6 Mark II did a very good job at capturing the details and telling the story. Now, for 2022, will this continue to be my workhorse? 100%. Mainly because I can't afford an A7S III right now, but that's because that is the low light king, and this, it does okay. Here's a little test footage. Alright, so here we're ISO 400. We're currently one stop underexposed. ISO 600. ISO 800. ISO 1000. ISO 1600. ISO 3000. And this is ISO 6400. ISO 12800. But digressing, getting back to my point, this is, for what you pay for, the best camera on the market. $850 with a speed booster and a lens, you're talking $1,500, and you have a full frame workhorse that tops out the EOS R, which only shoots 120 and 720p. It rivals the R6 outside of the in-body stabilization, and it doesn't overheat like the R5. Sorry, Canon. Now, if you're thinking about buying this, picking one up to begin photography with, 100% go with this one before you go with the Canon M50 or anything like that. The Canon M50 you will grow out quickly, even though that's what I'm using right now as my studio camera, and I don't have many complaints about it, but yet again, 720p 120 is unacceptable. And in 4K 24 and 60 frames per second, dual pixels, like, bye-bye. I'm not gonna work. So if you're gonna spend the money, spend a little extra, get the M6 Mark II, you will not be upset. As I said, get a speed booster or just the basic adapter, run an EF lens. You're going to have a banging camera for Instagram photos, small customer work, or YouTube. Just remember, if you're gonna vlog, buy the side adapter and see what you're gonna do. Now that's gonna do it for my first episode of the year. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, smash that subscribe button, comment, share, follow me on Instagram, and I will see you in the next one.